Hi, I'm Tim from the Marathon Mates. On this episode of the Flying Runner, we're talking the good, the bad, and the ugly about gels and nutrition. We'll talk about how much and how often you should fuel, as well as discuss how to best select the right gels for you. We know that gels can cause all sorts of stomach and performance issues for runners, so in this episode, we'll get to the bottom of it. Are you ready to run? Let's go.
Welcome to the thrilling world of the Flying Runner, brought to you by the Marathon Mates.
Hi everyone, I'm Tim from the Marathon Mates, and welcome to episode number 88 of the Flying Runner podcast. On tonight's episode, we're talking everything there is to talk about when it comes to gels and nutrition. We'll share our knowledge and talk about the things that we do to help us get out there and run to our very best. But first, before we do anything else, let's me introduce you to my co-host tonight, to Tony, my fellow six-star medalist. How are you going, mate?
Hey, I'm good, Tim. I'm good. It's just us two this week coming back refreshed from the week off. So
Yeah.
let's fire away.
Yeah, I have to apologise on behalf of Lucia, who is tied up with other commitments tonight, and Tara, who is having a week off just with some other issues going on. So, all good there. But as we usually do, Tony, how's your week been? And more importantly, how is everything health wise going for you?
Yeah, very short, sharp week for me last week. I pretty much stopped training from Wednesday. So I had a couple of runs there. And then on Friday, as I may have mentioned, I went in to have the cataracts on my right eye removed, and so can't run now for 2 weeks. So I can do some walking, but to be honest, I've just done nothing since the surgery, and probably won't do anything again tomorrow morning. To be honest, we've got a little bit of prep. We've got a cyclone that's potentially bearing down on us here in southeast Queensland, so I need to get some fuel in the car. I need to get some sandbags, etc., just in case. So, yeah, I'll be just doing some walking from here on in. So, a pretty easy training week for me, I think. So, and yourself?
Yeah, the same. I'm still walking. Ribs are feeling good now. They're still sore every once in a while when I cough or when something goes on there, but generally I don't notice them. The elbow itself feeling good, but as I've said, I think I've said it before. Even when I start to feel good, the urge will be to start running. But when I think I'm ready to run, I'm just going to give it another week or two. So it's only been 3 and a bit weeks since the incident. So I'm not 100% healed, so I think I'm still probably 2 more weeks, 2 to 3 more weeks away from doing any real running. So the last week I've been walking, doing a fair amount of walking. Went to parkrun on Saturday and walked at parkrun as a park walker at Bunyaville, and again helped some first timers come to parkrun and really enjoy the parkrun experience. Went for a walk yesterday with Tara. Did our sort of long walk day with Tara on Sunday, and it was great again. Still itching to run. I really want to run, but I'm going to be smart with it. I've got too many things I want to do this year, and stuffing around with injuries is not the thing I want to be doing. So yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and then I guess after the run yesterday, after the walk, like me, you would have been glued to the Tokyo Marathon as well, and following
Mm.
that event. So yeah, just a
Yeah,
normal day.
congratulations to everyone we know that competed yesterday, and some
Yep,
really notable ones. Anne Marie Waycott
yep.
looked a bit dodgy there for a while. Anne Marie, the cutoffs were catching up with you, but it was good to see you get across that finish line.
Yep.
Robert Wang, our good friend, who was back in episode well before this one, but for who runs the Facebook group World Majors Challenge. awesome job. Like, I do not know how he did it. He had potentially a herniated disc in his back.
Yep.
So
Sciatic pain and all sorts of other problems as well. Yeah, so amazing how he was able to get through that. But as I said to Tara, Robert's been there and done that before, so
yeah.
he knows what to do, and it's not his first run around the Tokyo course, and he knew what to expect going there, and also he's the sort of guy that will play it down to the exact minute that he needs to be able to do it.
And I think he did that because there was a stage there at the 30K where just wasn't moving on the tracking.
Yep.
And I'm saying, no, he's gone. He's gone because he was coming up to that 33.5. That's the tough one.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden I see him at the 35K mark, and I said, "Oh, right, so he's got through. You beauty." And then the 37.8 loomed, and I'm thinking, "Oh no, that would be the worst." In my mind, that would be the worst one to get swept at. You're
Yes.
almost there. And 37.8, but he got through that, and he did a sneaky little Facebook post saying, "I know a lot of you are wondering whether I've made it." And then all of a sudden you see the 40K side. So well
Yeah.
done, Robert. But you had
Yeah.
some other
Yeah.
friends of yours that competed.
Yeah. Brian and Monica, who are regular listeners to this episode, to this show, participated as well and got through pretty well. Monica went very fast. I think that was her fastest ever marathon that she's run, so that was good. And Bill Troy, another one of our listeners as well, was able to get through. So quite a few people. I think at one stage there I was listening, tracking multiple people, and it's one of the failings. The app that they put out only allows you to track 4 people unless you pay a
Yeah.
premium rate. So you have to switch people on and off all the time to try and see where they're at on the course, and yeah, get a bit tricky
And
with it and download it to multiple devices.
yeah, Tokyo being Tokyo as well, it's really hard sometimes to have that signal, that GPS signal. So
Yep.
sometimes people are just sitting there. And once again, at the 10K, I think I made reference when in our Tokyo show that when I was tracking you in 2023, you and Tara, there was just this long period of time around the 10K where you're just stationary.
Yep.
Now, you guys had a toilet stop around the same time, but the same thing happened for both Robert and the people that I was tracking, is that there was this big, long delay. So I don't think Tokyo is great for tracking people on GPS.
It's pretty good, but yeah, it has those lags. It was the same last year when we were tracking you and Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
At times, Sharon would be well in front of you, and then other times she would be behind you, and vice versa. So it's still a good app. I really do like the technology they've got there, where it is pretty much live tracking with the dots tracking
Mm-hmm.
along, but it can be a little bit jumpy around just because of the high-rise buildings. But anyway, that was that. Well done to everyone who did it. Now it's that time of the week where we talk about the news. Tony, what's been happening around the world this week?
Well, you've only got the choice of me, Tim. So I've got the news again. So, hey, before we jump into the elites at Tokyo, there's been a little bit. It's been interesting to see Tokyo itself and some of the feedback. It was an unseasonably warm day for the marathon in Tokyo, and I think that caught some people out by the looks of it. And it snowed there today, so
Yeah.
fancy that. It's just two extremes from what you can gather.
Yep.
But it seemed to be a different Tokyo from the one that me and you sort of ran, and a lot of people complaining that they ran out of water at the water stations. There was the volunteers, just doing the best that they can, and they were tipping water into people's hands. Apparently, some people were getting their Picari sweat in their hands to slurp it up, but so that was disappointing. And I know Anne Marie had no water from I think the 27K mark. She told me
27.
so.
Yep.
So that's a little bit disappointing. There was some, we talked about how smooth the roads were when we did our preview of Tokyo, and I stand by it. They're the greatest roads we've run on in a major. but there was a lot of people complaining how rough they were. So
Wow.
I'm just wondering if they ran the same race or were they. I I I don't know. I don't get that one because
Yep.
there was, and I know that there was a motion with some people with the DNF and got swept and all of that. But ultimately, I believe that the Tokyo roads are nothing short of magnificent to run on. So I'm not
Yep.
quite sure where that came from. I know one lady was talking that every step she took, it felt like she was twisting her ankle. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's never. I've been to, as you know, I've been to Japan and to Tokyo many times for business and pleasure, and the roads have never ever been anything but perfect whenever I've been there. So
yeah,
I don't know where those statements are coming from. It may have been just her shoes or her orthotics or something in the shoe not working, but it just seems weird. But the water thing, yeah, I've heard that from a couple of sources as well, that the water wasn't flowing,
yeah,
which is odd. You know, you've been there, I've been there. There's 9 tables at each drink
yeah,
station. They're stacked up 3, 4, 5 layers high with cups filled with water.
yeah,
There's
absolutely.
plenty of water there right through till the end of the day. That just seems very odd.
A lot of people were putting it down, Tim, to the fact that it was an unseasonably warm day, and a lot
Yeah,
of the faster runners were grabbing 2, 3 cups at a time, one to drink and one to tip all over themselves.
yeah,
So in some cases, there was plenty of water. There was just no cups to put them into. So,
yeah,
that's a little bit disappointing. But by the same token, we had no dramas when we ran
yeah.
Tokyo. So,
A- And
um,
and the organisers, they can't predict that on the day. They know it might be warm, but they don't really know how many cups people are going to take. And the problem is, and I've seen it here when I've talked to Phil Hungerford, one of our previous guests before, about organising races. The problem is once you run out of something at a drink station, it's very hard for the organisers to get
mm,
supplies to that drink station because all the roads are closed and
yeah.
the ones that aren't closed are jammed with traffic. So trying to get things to a location on a course to top up supplies is very hard for organisers to do.
Makes it very, very hard. And just the other thing that I just want to touch on, there's been a little bit of commentary about the Tokyo Marathon DNF number. So some people claim that there was over 10,000 people that DNF'd yesterday,
Wow.
which when you consider there's 37,000 that
Yeah.
start the race, that is huge. And if
One in
that was
four.
the case, that was disappointing. But there was probably 1,500 DNFs in total because the people where that claim came from, when you go onto the Tokyo Marathon results, it defaults to the men. It's called the men's marathon, the women's marathon. And yes, there was 26,000 men that finished the race. And so when you just looked at that number, you would and not realize that it's defaulted to the men, you may make the assumption there were 10,000 DNFs,
Yeah.
but the reality was there was 9,000 female runners that finished, which then raises that number to 36,000.
Yeah.
So if you hear a little bit of scuttlebutt out there about 10,000 DNF, it
Uh,
is actually not right. It's not correct. It's closer to 1,500. So, but let's talk about some athletes that certainly did not DNF. And we're going to talk about the women first because Sutumi Kibidi successfully defended her title in the women's race, which I think is a fantastic effort.
Yep.
Tadisi Takili won the men's race, but let's talk about the women because coming 10th is a good old Aussie called Jessica Stenson, which I think is just an amazing race. 2:22. She ran it in. The winner was 2:16. So while there's still a considerable gap, the reality is that our lady marathoners here in Australia are really starting to make their mark, which I think is great. So,
Yep.
Satumi
That's
from it. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's a PB for Jess, and I think it's the third fastest female time ever by an Australian. So,
Yeah.
well done. And for those that remember the whole kerfuffle last year at the Olympics, Jess was the one who was added in there at the end that pulled out Lisa Waitman, and Jess
Mm.
came into it, and then ended up being the highest performed or best
Yeah.
performed Aussie in the three of them. So she's got a real pedigree for running in big races and delivering when it matters. So well done, Jess Stenson.
And you can just start to see that confidence in that with all the female marathon runners. It's good rivalry. They're good competitors, but they're also good allies. So they're supporting each other and driving themselves up. So Sutimi from Ethiopia won it in 2:16:31. Winfrida Mora from Kenya was second in 2:16:56. And Hawi Fisa from Ethiopia was third in 2:17. So quite a tight race at the end of the day, but it was good to see Jess there in 10th space. Now,
Satumi Kabidi, who won it, I haven't watched the race or the highlights, but apparently she just set a cracking pace from the very get-go and really pushed the field, I think, from the beginning is what I heard. So it seems like she was hell-bent on trying to get there and win it. The other one that was interesting, I thought Bridget Kosgei was meant to be running. I'm not sure what happened to her, but she's a former world record holder and she hasn't finished in the top 10. So it'll be interesting to find out what happened to Bridget as well.
And Paula Radcliffe,
yes,
running her first marathon in 10 years, 2:57.
2:57.
So, and 111th, I'm thinking she came overall.
Yep.
So fantastic result. So well done, Paula.
I saw her finished and she looked more like you, me, and everyone else in the final sort of 20, 30 meters of the finish where she was struggling to get there. But, like the pro or the former pro she is, she knew what she needed to do and she got there under 3 hours, which is fantastic for 51-year-olds. Yeah.
Awesome to see. So in the men, Benson Kipruto was the defending champion, and he ultimately got sixth in this race in a time of 2:05:46. As we said, to Keeley from Ethiopia. So two Ethiopians won it, which is awesome. 2:03:23, followed by Deriza Galata from Ethiopia, 2:03:51, and Vincent Kamoy.
Yep.
And 2:04. And I won't bother about the rest. So
maybe ninth. Ninth was Joshua Cheptegei. We've talked about him before. He's
famous
as the world record holder in the 5,000 and 10,000 meters on the track. He ran a PB for his second marathon of 2:05:59. So a bit of a step up from his performance a year and a bit ago in Valencia, 2 years ago in Valencia, where he ran, I think it was around 2:08, 2:09. So
awesome.
PB for him. Now, just one of the advantages of traveling with a company like Traveling Fit. My friends Brian and Monica, who were there when they were coming back from the marathon afterwards, saw the press gathered out the front of the hotel or in the lobby of the hotel there where they stay at KO Plaza. And there was Keeley, the winner of the men's marathon, and Satumi, who won the women's marathon, having a media event, and they got to meet them, have photos taken with them. So,
oh wow!
One of the joys of staying with the traveling companies is they do put you in the hotels quite often where the elites are staying. So, you might get a chance to meet them like they did, which was pretty awesome experience.
Yeah. So so that's Tokyo done for another year.
Yeah.
So and I've got to laugh because it does seem like they had plenty of merchandise this year. They just ran out of water. So
just take what you can get.
Yeah. When they nail this, it's going to be we already know it's a great marathon. So there's always going to be one or two hiccups, and sometimes it's unforeseen. Interestingly, during the week, Tim, Cape Town Marathon, which we know is now in its second year of candidacy. Third year, but it's got to pass this year to become a major, and it's had a date shift. So it was September, October. Yeah.
October.
And now they've moved it to May. So this is a really interesting scenario because, as we know, Sydney's pushed theirs back from the previous September date into August to sort of fit in line with what they call the spring marathons, the Chicago, Berlin, and
Berlin,
New
New
York.
York.
And now we're seeing Cape Town move to May, which I think is very, very interesting, because if they do become a major at the end of this year, that will sit right after the fall marathons of London, Tokyo, and Boston. So it's
It's going to
very
be
interesting.
interesting. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. So this is for next year. This is not for this year. So this year they'll still host the event in October, which they're
Yeah.
being judged on to whether they become a major.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that the ballot entry for next year's event, which has been held on the 24th of May, the ballot entries open on the 6th of November.
Wow.
So they're hoping that if they become a major, that they'll have to be announced somewhere before the 6th of November, you would think, to
New York
be able to
announcement
get it there.
again.
Yeah. So it might be a
Yeah.
New York announcement, and then the following
Yeah.
day or two, up comes the entries for Cape Town.
Without being a cynical little man that I can be at times, Tim, I would like to think that someone's whispered in the ear of Cape Town and said, "This is what you need to do."
Yep.
And I'm, just reading between the lines, they would have to do something momentously bad not to be the eighth major, in my mind,
Correct.
based on
So
this announcement.
yeah, so I'm looking at it going November 2nd is, I think, New York Marathon, and then Thursday the 6th of November would be the ballot entry day. So if it's like this year, they'll announce it on the Friday beforehand, or maybe the 30th of October, 31st of October,
Mm.
to give everyone less than a week or so to then enter into the ballot. So that'll be interesting.
It will be, and I remember we were in New York with the announcement of Sydney, and
Yep.
there were so many questions about when does the ballot open, how's the candidacy club work, and all of this sort of stuff. What about the travel operators? How does all that work? Whereas at least Cape Town and say, well, we've already told you the ballot's 6th of November. Get it in now while you can. So
Yeah.
at least removes that line of questioning. And
Yeah.
and I guess the last one, we just mentioned Sydney, and this is a little bit disappointing to see. I was going to make a statement before that maybe Ethiopia is taking over some of the glamour or glitz of Kenyan running at the moment. And this next piece of news certainly doesn't help the Kenyan running, but reigning Sydney Marathon champion Briman Misur Kiprobro, have I said that right?
No, I don't.
He's provisionally suspended after recording a positive test for a prohibited substance. Now, the Kenyan racer returned a positive sample of EPO and something else in an out of competition test conducted with just 2 months after he won the 2024 Sydney Marathon. Kiproror set the course record in a time of 2:06:18 with his victory at Sydney last year. Sydney have confirmed there was no adverse findings presented by the gentleman in pre-competition and in-competition tests conducted on race day. However, they have put out a pretty good statement in my mind with the news, and if he is found guilty, he will be hit with a lifetime ban from the Sydney event. So he's currently provisionally suspended from competition, pending the outcome of the case. So another Kenyan court, which is so disappointing. And of course, there's an investigation. There's the lawful process that has to follow, but it looks a little dodgy, and I'd be keen to hear your thoughts, Tim.
Yeah, it's another sad day for Kenyan running. And who would have thought this a few years ago, that we'd be talking about all these Kenyans that we thought have been born with superpowers and super genes and all this sort of stuff. And yes, they do have all that. They're gifted genetically, but it seems like the competition is so fierce for these guys to earn a living out of what they do, that they're resorting to taking drugs, and it's just sad. It's not what the sport's about. But I really love that statement from Sydney Marathon saying, regardless of what happens, if he's found guilty, we're banning him for lifetime. And
Yeah.
I wish more events did that. At the end of the day, the event is owned by events, the companies that own those events. So they have a right to accept or reject people's entries regardless. So if you have been tested before and found um, guilty of taking banned substances, if more and more events took on an approach to say, no, we're not accepting people into our events that have been tested positive before, it will clear these people out. The 2 to 3, 4 year bans that they get aren't always enough to stop them from competing in the future.
Yeah, it's a disappointing week, and that's the news.
Thanks, Tony. So yes, now we're going to be talking about gels, and more gels. So we really are tonight, Tony, just going to be talking largely about gels rather than all forms of nutrition. And I can tell you, I've been looking through all the different types of gels that are out there, and I'm holding up numerous packets of them at the moment,
Yeah.
of gels that we get. So there is a lot of concerns, I guess, people have, particularly those that are not confident when it comes to running or aren't sure how to take gels, or if you're stepping up from a shorter distance to taking gels. I think after shoes, gels and nutrition is probably the next most talked about thing and discussed topic amongst runners.
100%.
Yeah, so
100%.
so finding the right gel and or nutrition that works for you can be difficult and a time-consuming process.
Yeah, so just for the listeners, I am not quite sure how much impact I'm going to make on the remainder of this podcast. I personally don't use gels, but I'm sure that Tim's reserved a little bit of space there for me to talk about the blocks that I use. But back to you, Tim.
I can give you some samples if you want. I've got a heap here. So I think every runner out there, like myself and Tara, has a cupboard of gels somewhere there that they've either bought, tried, been given for free somewhere as a sample, or have been, given or handed them out on a course and pocketed them, thinking I'll try that at some stage. So I wanted to get into the basics of gels and talk about gels, but we can open it up a little bit into the blocks. I use a combination. Tara, I know, uses a combination. We switch between blocks and gels. And there's some reasons around that as well. So we can talk a little bit about that tonight as well, Tony, and bring you in on the discussion a bit more.
Thank you.
So I guess, like with these things, it's our opinions. It's what we do. But at the end of the day, the basics around gels. Let's get into the basics. Why do you need gels? Essentially, you need gels because they provide you with some form of energy source that you need to be able to keep going, especially over longer distances and through periods of endurance and exercise. In order for gels or any form of nutrition to work, they need to be able to be quick absorbing and be able to be done with fairly minimal digestive effort. You don't want your gut churning out huge amounts of energy and consuming more energy to try and process the food. So essentially that's why you have them, and that's why they are in a gel type format of most of the time, is so that they can be quickly digested. They come in all sorts of different types of things. So but generally the basic ingredients of a gel or a nutrition that you want when you're out there is it's got to have some form of carbohydrate in it to give you some energy. Quite often they'll have some form of electrolyte or some sort of salt replacement quite often. And then you can get other ones in there that have got other things like caffeine or sodium or extra bits and pieces to them. So they come in all sorts of different ones. As I said, they come in blocks, they come in gel format, they come in drinks, they come in whole foods. You can have bananas and things like that. And I know people like Tara who much prefer to chew a banana than she would a gel half the time. So they're the key basics around them. Now, we have talked about nutrition before on episode number 46. So I guess, have I missed anything there around the basics of gels and nutrition in general, Tony?
No, I think that's a pretty good place to start because, especially for the uninitiated, the gel market can be, some are almost worthless to use based on what their content is. Some have got sugar that far too much. So I think it's a really good place to start. One of the reasons, the gel format, as you said, is all about that quick absorption, right? Into
Yep.
to give you that concentrated carb, but for a lot of people and myself, it just feels like you're potentially like you've just transgressed back to the beginning of your life and sucking down some baby food, right? So,
Yep.
so it's probably more for me anyway. I know with gels that's probably one of the main reasons I don't take them. I just don't like the way that they go down. But there's a reason why they're in that format, which you talked about.
Yeah, and you mentioned baby food. It is interesting because I think that is the basis of where gels originated from. I remember I used to do quite elite swimming back in the day when I was a kid. So we're talking 40 odd years ago now, 40 years. Um, and I remember at that stage, even as a kid, the energy sources we would have were things like baby jars of baby food, of apple pureed
Mm,
baby food would be the thing to get the energy in for swimming and be able to absorb it quickly. And that was the science at the time because they didn't have things like gels. And I think that's probably the basis of it, and that's probably why they do take that format. Is it is easy to swallow, it's easy to digest. But I think over the years, the manufacturers have then added more and more and more stuff into these gels, and they've become horrible things sometimes. They become quite thick and gluggy. But yeah, I
sticky.
guess sticky. Yeah, the whole thing can be quite horrible. And we'll talk about
Mm,
taste and texture a bit later on. But it is important to note that when you are looking at your gels, it's important to understand the little panels on the back of the gels and the nutritional information that sits on the back of those gel packets, and really start to learn what the numbers in there mean. So they do talk about calories and how much calories you can get from that gel. They generally talk about fats, and hopefully they've got 0% fats, a lot of them, but some may need some fats from time to time to give you something else to burn. But generally they'll talk in there about carbohydrates, sodium, sugars, and protein as well, sometimes on those nutritional things. So obviously you're looking for something that's got high carbohydrates and high calorie values. So
mm,
it is interesting. They all have different ones. When I look at all these packets, they've all got varying amounts of carbohydrate. They've all got varying amounts of sugar and protein and calories on them. So you are right. Some of them are next to useless, and some of them are more a sports drink or a sports chew
mm.
rather than anything else to make you feel good. Some of them are actually more designed as a pre-workout thing, and some of them are also designed as a post-workout thing as well, sometimes as well. So
Yeah.
really interesting to understand all those things. Um, so generally, as I said, knowing when to how and when to use them. So Tony, how often would you fuel, or what's your standard fueling time frame? Would you on a long run?
Yeah, for me, and once again, just based on the experience and what I trained for, I know the accepted science says somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes, right? We
Yep.
should be taking some. And once again, if you're a back of the pack runner and you're out there for a 4 hour long run, that's a lot of gels you've got to start taking down if you're going to do it every 30 minutes. So that's what's that? 8 gels.
Yep.
So they're thereabouts, so it might be 7. So personally, from my own personal thing, I aim to have nutrition every 5K, and then that's followed by hydration, so that I've got the nutrition, I've got the blocks going down, and then I'm bringing them into my stomach with hydration at or just after the same time. So for me, during a long run, I'm doing that 5K in about 35 to 40 minutes, depending. So it's somewhere in the middle of the preferred science of between 30 and 60
Yep.
minutes.
Yep. And Tara and I are the same. We are pretty religious. It's generally 45 minutes, plus or minus 5 minutes, depending on where the drink station is. So we try to work out where the drink stations are by looking at the course map, working out, okay, at about 7 kilometers, there's a drink station. So we'll take it at about 6.5 kilometers, knowing that that's about 45 minutes of running for us. So yeah, again, it's about 7 gels for a race that we would take for a marathon. It is interesting because I know, like Jess Stenson, what did you say before? She ran it in 2 hours 22,
Yeah.
Tokyo yesterday. I saw her lay flat on social media the night before, and she had 8 gels for
Wow.
the race for 2 hours 22. But the difference between her and the normal runners is that she doesn't have to carry those gels. She'll strap those gels to her drink bottles at each of the drink stations. So if they're getting drinks every 5Ks or so
Mm.
in their drinks, she's also having a gel at that point with her drinks. So yeah, but it was interesting. 8 gels she would take. So they're fueling a lot more rapidly than
Mm.
30 minutes. They're fueling every sort of 15, 20 minutes, but they are performing at a higher level too.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the strategy behind that. So whether it's a just in case strategy of having a gel available in case she's feeling she needs it.
Yeah,
But yeah, that would be so interesting to see if that's actually the case, that she has the 8 during a
yeah.
2 hour 22, or whether she has 4 and she's got the other 4 just in case. So it'd be,
Or
we
was
might.
it just a lay flat advertising for her particular gel brand?
Oh.
Who knows? But I would not dispute that she takes 8 during a race or thereabouts. At the end of the day, they're looking for
Yeah,
calories. If they can get out of a pack like this an additional 75 calories or whatever it is, or this one's 100 calories, the one she's got,
yeah,
100 calories every 5Ks or so that she's getting it. That's good. She's consuming a lot more than that, obviously, in calories, but
yeah.
she's replacing it with something. So um, who knows? The other thing to note is, as we said, you've got to have them with water. It helps absorb and minimize stomach issues. The other thing is that if you go too late with your gels, it can really affect you if you don't have a gel. So for instance, if we're not fueling or having nutrition, I know for Tara and I, if we miss one at 45 minutes and then all of a sudden we go an hour and a half, we notice it, and we notice it in our performance. It really starts to drop off. So the gels
Mm.
do help and help keep us at that higher level.
So having it before you need it sort of scenario.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. All right. So how do you choose the right gel, Tony? This
Mm.
is the hard one because we've all got horror stories of gels. Well, maybe not me because I can largely eat any gel, but I've seen what it does to Tara. I know what it does to other people out there, and you've explained it as well, Tony. You don't necessarily like the taste of them, so it is important to try and choose the right gel for you. As I said, there's a whole range. I don't know. There's probably 1,000 different gels. Literally
Easy.
1,000 gels or more out on the market at the moment. Some are natural and have natural products in them, and some are synthetic. It's also, you need to be mindful of all the extras. Are you just looking for something to give you carbohydrate, or are you looking for something to replace electrolytes, or are you looking for something that's giving you a bit more instant boost, which has got high sugar content? You're looking for something that helps with maintaining your muscle strength and recovery afterwards, which is your proteins and things like that. So it gets difficult choosing them. And then if you are choosing gels using different carb sources, for instance, some of them will use maltodextrin or glucose, some of them will use fructose, some of them will have dual carb processes as well. So
Mm.
it all gets very confusing, and I don't know if I know enough in this space, Tony. I don't think anyone really knows or understands it because there's so much marketing out there around all these gels. But what I do know is that most gels will contain somewhere around 20 to 30 grams of carbs, and that seems to be the range. When I look at various packets of them, they're all around that mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is different for each of them, but yeah, you really need to find the right one for you.
Yeah. And some are going to be thicker, some are more watery. no matter what, but they always seem to make your hands really sticky, which is another thing that I really don't like while I'm
Yeah.
running. But my hands have got enough issues. Thank you very much without them getting sticky. But one thing I do know about gels, and people we know, and elite athletes, for example, there's gels with caffeine, and most of them, most of the good advice around this is that if you were to run a marathon, and if you're Jess with the 8 that she's got, she would maybe have 4 of those that are caffeine and 4 that are normal, so that you're alternating.
Yeah.
Because I would believe having too much caffeine is probably a bad thing while you're over exertion. So caffeine's alternating your gels between caffeine and non-caffeine is probably the preferred science. And I say probably because I don't really know, but I've heard a lot of people
Yeah.
talk about alternating their gels and not to have caffeine gels all the time.
Yeah. So I do that. I generally, when I start a long run, I will take some paracetamol, which has got caffeine infused in the paracetamol. So I know that gives me 4 hours of caffeine boost in there, right? Now that 4 hours, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours is lost driving to the start of where my run is, doing some warm ups or whatever, waiting in the starting corrals, whatever. So I know I'm really only going to get maybe 2 hours of that caffeine in that paracetamol. I'll generally, if I'm doing a marathon, won't take my caffeine one until about 27, 28 Ks, maybe 30 Ks, just to give me that extra boost. One of the things with caffeine is it can help reduce pain a little bit. And that's one of the reasons why I take it. It gives you a bit of a numbing effect through the body, but it also gives you just an extra bit of a boost. And for me, between 25 and 30 is where I start to need a bit of a boost. I start to go down a little bit mentally through there. I start to fatigue, and you start to realize it's a long way still to go in the run. So having a bit of caffeine at that point I find helps. But yeah, it's not something I would do all the time. And it's the same with my fuel. We'll take a combination of shot blocks, which are cliff cliff blocks, um, and some gels and some caffeine. Now, Tara doesn't do the caffeine. She doesn't like the caffeine. It goes through her and upsets her stomach too much.
Mm.
But we'll do that. And then, that's where she brings in a banana at around that same time, 25, 27 Ks, has a banana. So you've got to find what works for you. But yeah, the caffeine is one to really be cautious of. Too much caffeine can, it's a diuretic at the end of the day. It will mean that you've got to remove water from your system essentially. So you need to be mindful of that as
Mm.
well. There are other gels out there that are not so syrupy and not so thick. There's one here that I've got, which is one we found when we were in the UK, in the US. It's called Edge. It's actually like a paste rather than a gel. It's fairly
Mm.
neutral taste as well. So we found that one and we've really enjoyed it. So if anyone is looking for something a little bit different that is more of a paste like, doesn't feel as gluggy and syrupy, that's one called Edge that we like. But yeah, and again, pretty good calorie content as well in it. It's, I think, a dairy based one. I think they take it from milk products and then turn it into a gel product paste from there. So yeah, it's a different one, but it actually works for us. I guess the other thing to be mindful of is if you are running races, you may need to, or you might want to reduce your electrolyte content in your gels. So some of these gels have high electrolyte levels, which means they've got high salt content in them, high sodium levels. It may be that you go, well, I don't need that in my gels because I've got the electrolyte on course, the liquid electrolyte.
Mm.
So you don't want to be doubling up too much in that space as well.
Yeah, and once again, you train with that in mind, wouldn't you, Tim? You would train with, whether you reduce the amount of, the sodium or the electrolytes in your gels, you would train that way, knowing that you've got electrolytes on course. But one of the other challenges that you may face is that because some of the electrolytes on course are in the ready to make format, so they'll do it
Yep.
in powder form and they'll mix it. Some races have been known to do that at half strength. So,
Yep.
I don't know the logic. There's probably logic there about gastro, intestinal sort of stuff that having it at full strength may upset more people. So I get that, but just be mindful of that as well. Don't fully
Yep.
rely. Maybe have one or two in your kit that just in
Yep.
case.
That's it. So, yeah, I think what we're saying is you've got to plan and know what you're doing when you're out there on the courses. You've got to plan it through and work through it either in the training, but it's more about knowing and understanding the race you're going into. All right, the next one, flavor and taste preferences. Now, I can tell you every product out there, whether it's Edge, Morton, Cis, any of those, they have not one gel but multiple gels in the same gel but in multiple flavors. Sweet, savory, plain, fruity, citrusy, chocolatey, caramelly, pineapple-y, you name it, there's a flavor out there for it. So first things first, you're going to have to find the flavor you like. And I don't know about you, Tony, but I've got to the end of a race before, and the last thing I feel like is having anything sweet because all I've been having is sweet gels the whole way through the race.
Yep. Yeah. I remember London and the orange Lucasade energy
Oh,
drink
yeah.
that was on course. By the time you finished that race, actually by about the 30K mark, you just could not look at another bottle of Lucasade orange ever again. So,
No.
yeah.
So if you are somebody who isn't into those sort of flavors, trying to find neutral ones out there that don't have much of a flavor is one way to go. And I guess that's why Morton is popular, and a lot of people use Morton because it is an inert flavor. There is no real flavor to it. But there are other brands out there that have it. I know as these Edge ones, this one's a pineapple one, but they do have a plain one with no flavor. So it's about finding the one that suits you. There are other ones that use real food ingredients. So they use things like honey, fruit puree, maple syrup, etc., etc. Again, I'm not a big fan of those honey stingers or anything like that. They are too thick and too gluggy and too sweet for me. I can have them, I can tolerate them, I can run with them, but I just don't like that sucking them out and having it sit in your mouth for so long. It just stays in your mouth, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're making it sound so attractive.
I don't think I'm going to get a sponsorship from Stingers by any chance. Honey Stingers.
Yeah, you can just see the gel companies lining up saying we need Jim in our market.
Well, as you can see, I'm not representing any particular products here. I've got multiple
Yeah.
products, and we've tried them all, had some sort of use with them over the years. Do you see any benefit in switching flavors? I'm not one to really switch flavors during a run or a race, but have you tried doing that before and had different flavors?
Yeah, with my blocks, I actually do. So there's two types of blocks that I'll run with. One is
Yep.
from Scratch Nutrition, and its flavor is like a lime and a green tea. Right,
Oh,
so
yep.
it's really quite neutrally, I guess, is the way I like it. And then the other one is from GU, which is a salted lime. So once again, there's a lime flavor, but there's subtlety, there's subtle differences in both, so that you don't feel like you're having the same block over and over and over again. I used to, when I first started running, I would take probably 3 or 4 different blocks and have some jelly beans, etc., etc.
Yep.
But as I've got used to it, I take a pack of the salted lime from GU and a pack of the lime and green tea from Scratch, and that usually pulls me up.
Yep. Yep. And I guess for listeners out there who are stepping up into this world, you're going to understand that once you find something that works and you like the flavors, you tend to stick with it. I guess you don't
Yeah.
change too much in this space. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to practice running with these gels, practice sucking some of these in, to really understand how long they take for you to swallow and get in. Because obviously the quicker you get them into your throat and down into your stomach, the quicker they digest and do what they're meant to do. You don't want them sitting in the mouth and being slow to swallow down. So yeah, that's the key there. The next thing to consider when choosing gels is around the packaging and portability. And I don't know, Tony, how many times you've had to do it, but trying to rip some of these gels open in the middle of a race can be difficult. It can be distracting, and it can be almost downright near impossible with some of the tear mechanisms they have on some of these gel packets. I
Yeah.
remember one, I can't remember what it was, but it had a little handle where it tried to solve the problem when you rip the tab off the packet, that you don't throw away just a little bit of tab, and try to have it sticking to the packet, so that you tore it away, but then there was this special device that held it onto the main packet, so you threw the whole thing away in one hit. Do you think I could ever get that working properly when I was running? Just couldn't do it.
In my experience, the worst one is the cramp fix product in the gel packet. So
That
great
one?
product. Yeah, it's a great product, but it is horrible, horrible, horrible to tear. And as I said, it's a great product, but they've got to solve this problem somewhere. And I think sometimes when they try and solve the problem, they create a new one. And the reality is, you want to open it quick and get it in quick,
Yeah.
right? So yeah.
Yeah. And if you've got sweaty hands, they become even more problematic. And if your packets, particularly some of these ones, I know that Morton ones are problematic because they're more of a paper-based packet. Even though they're plastic, they're more papery.
Mhm.
So when they get wet, the paper part of the product starts to wear away a bit as well. They can be quite hard to tear. So
Yeah.
you need to consider all that. How you're going to open it, how you're going to manage it when you're running. Do you use it as an opportunity when you're walking through an aid station and you're walking to rip it, have that, and then drink your water at the same time, and take the extra few seconds to get it right? It can be challenging.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing to consider is obviously how many gels, as we said before. I tend to take about 7 on a marathon, 6 or 7. I take 6. I think I need 6 for when I run, but I have an extra one just in case, because I'm a just in case person that always, if
Yeah.
something turns to shit, I've got an extra one there just in case. But it is important to understand that how you're going to carry that many. Do you have them in a pocket somewhere? Do you have them in a spy belt? For me, I have them in a couple of places. I have them in a pocket on the back of my shorts. I have them in a spy belt as well. How do you carry yours, Tony?
I have a little, let's call it a bum bag, for want of another word,
Yep.
that is just a belt around the waist with a bit of a pocket there for me to carry my stuff.
Yep.
And just for the listeners, it is very, very likely that the flavor you like and the gel that you like will be the hardest one to open. So
Yep.
it's just the way of the world, right?
I Yeah, and on that, I do pre-tear some of the gels uh, a little bit. So obviously, I don't go to the point where they're then oozing them out, but I grab the packaging. I try to open the gel a little bit more so that it's a bigger tab for me to grip onto
Yeah,
to be
good,
able to rip open. So
great tip.
pre-tearing before you race is a good way of doing it. Um, and yeah, I don't know how many times I've seen gels scattered on roads where somebody's gone to pick them out of their pocket and they've dropped one of the gels that's in that pocket with the other one that they've grabbed, or they've dropped the one that they've got on the road and then kept
Mm,
running. So you've got to be prepared that, you know, you've got to be able to get them easily. You've got to be able to access them easily, but at the same time, need to ensure that you don't sabotage yourself going forward, that you end up not having gels at the end because you've dropped them along the way on the course.
yeah. And just the other point about on course, a lot of the marathons, as we know, will have a gel on course, but don't rely on that. So,
Yeah,
especially if you're a back of the pack runner or even a middle of the pack runner, a lot of people, for whatever reason, love the fact that they're free. And, I've heard stories of people grabbing 12. right?
Yep.
And just running. And I just think, what is the point of that? But that's what some people do. So don't rely on them. Make sure you've got your own.
Yeah, I think that was us in Berlin. There was a Morton zone there in Berlin where they were offering gels. We got to a certain point there and there was no gels.
Yeah.
And
Boston was another no gels
Yep,
at Boston
yep,
when we came through. So
yep, yep. So yeah, you can't rely on them being there. All right, and last but not least, when choosing a gel, it all comes down to costs and availability. So a standard gel, one off by itself in a packet like that, you're looking at about anywhere from about $4 to about $7 or $8, depending on the gel, the brand, the rest of it. It can be quite pricey. And a lot of the time you're actually paying for marketing and not really improved performance. So you need to understand that. Tony, have you got any tips to buy gels in a more budget-friendly way for some of our listeners rather than buying them one by
well,
one? At,
yeah, I think Amazon's a good place to do some price comparisons. There's a number of companies out there online. There's a push bike company called Pushies, which is linked also to Aid Station. So there's a number of different companies that are out there. And of course, if you need to actually get them urgently, one of the best places to go, because there seems to be more bike shops than running stores nowadays, is your local bike store, whatever that's going to be, will often have a range of gels as well, and of course, specialty running stores. But the best thing to do is just um, just find your little place online. They'll often have some discounts. There's some places that will offer you a subscription deal if you buy a certain amount of products over a certain period of time and just keep it on a revolving thing. But the drama with that is that you end up with a cupboard full of stuff.
yes. Yeah, and I guess you need to be wary when you're buying bulk gels, which Tara and I do, because both of us are running and we both consume more or less the same. So it's not a problem for us. But you must be wary of the expiration dates. Some of these products, some of these gels only have fairly short expiration dates on them. And if you are buying cheap ones, generally they're getting rid of stock that's nearing expiry dates. So be wary of that. A gel going a little bit over an expiry date is probably not going to kill you or hurt you too much. One that's sitting in a cupboard for 2 or 3 months, 4 months after the expiry date might end up being problematic later on. So just be mindful of that as well. And the chances are, if you like some flavor that's a bit odd or a bit out there, pineapple and passion fruit flavored gel that has caffeine in it, chances are you're probably the only person that wants that, and it won't last as a product for very long. So either buy a heap of them in bulk and find a way to preserve them so that they don't go expiring, or have to find another flavor. And that's the reality. Popular line items will stay popular and in product in demand, and suppliers will get rid of products that don't sell, or product lines that don't sell. So it is important to understand that as well. Yeah, that's one of the other challenges, I guess. The other thing is, I guess, if you are looking for information around gels a little bit more, go to some of the race expos. Even if you're not competing at the expos, just go into the expos. There's always gel suppliers there, and they'll always talk about their product. I know there's a lot of marketing in there, but they'll actually go through their products and show you all the good, the bad, and ugly, and we'll go through the whole discussion. And I guess that's the other bit to it as well, to understand the products better and to understand maybe where they're heading as a supplier and what their future thoughts are around some of those products as well and their lifespans.
Yeah, it is a category that continues to evolve and innovate. So you will see a lot of new gels come on the market. You will see some improvements in existing gels. You've just got to, as Tim was talking about, really understand how to read the nutrients and the nutrition, and understand what works for you. Because just because something's innovative or new doesn't mean it's right for you. So understand what it is that works for you, and then if you see your company or the company that you prefer innovating and doing something new, it's probably more likely then to be able to work for yourself. But it is always innovating, and I guess that also adds to some of the confusion out there, Tim, doesn't it?
That it does. It does. So that ends our topic, I guess. Ends our discussion, and we normally get a tip from me. So I'm going to give you my tip, which I've just been doing anyway. But I guess my tip this week is don't fall for the marketing hype when it comes to gels and nutrition. Take time to find the right gel for you. Test it in training, right? So buy them as one-off products or 2 or 3 products at a time. Go out, test them, see how you feel, see if you feel an improvement in your running, see how your gut handles it. And if you do get gut issues, move on to another product to try them. It's a good idea when you are buying some of these products to buy variety packs, and all the suppliers will have variety packs, which will contain, maybe 12 or 15 gels with, 2 or 3 gels of each flavor that they've got in them. And they're a good way to see which flavor is going to work best for you and your gut. The other thing is if you are suffering gut issues, and I know this is something that Tara does have issues with, it may be worth considering adding something like Currans. We've talked about Currans before, which helps Tara. She has problems with some of these gels, but since she's been taking Currans, she doesn't have the same issues because the Currans has settled her GI issues. So it is something there. And I guess the other last tip there is if you are a diabetic, it becomes even more difficult to try and find the right gel because of the sugars, the fructoses, the glucoses, etc., that are in there, and trying to find the right balance. So there are diabetic gels on the market. They are difficult to find, but there are some out there. And my tip is look for the right gel that suits you. And that's my tip this week, Tony. Anything further on that?
I think you've done a great job. And just for those listeners in the audience or viewers, if you do want to try Currans, in our show notes, there is a code where you can use to get 20% off as an introductory purchase to test it out. So
Yep.
in case you want to do that.
Yep. All right, Tony. So this episode is about to end, but before we do that, what's on next week?
Next week's going to be awesome. One of my most favorite people in the world, right? No, Hayley. Hayley Pymont is going to join us. Now, she's a former Indigenous Marathon Project participant, and she ran Berlin with us, right? So, and hence the reason why she's one of my favorite people in the world. The cheer that she gave Sharon and I as we're coming down towards the Brandenburg Gate is something that will forever stay in my mind and my memory. So she's run a number of marathons. She's recently done some ultras. She did 50K recently for, I think, men's health or mental health, or so. Amazing. But she ran Berlin in 2023 when we did it, of course. So last year she was the Indigenous ambassador for the Sydney Marathon. So she's certainly grown since being in the Indigenous Marathon Project, and she's coming on the show next week to talk about her journey and to outline what 2025 and beyond looks like for her. I'm just going to say, do not miss this one. This young lady is amazing. So that's what's happening next week.
100%. Thanks for that, Tony. I think 1 hour is probably not going to be enough. I think she'll be talking and talking and talking about all of her journeys that she's taken, and also the journeys that she's going to be doing in the near future as well. So I can't wait to get Hayley on and have a chat with her again. So thanks, Tony, for joining us tonight and having a chat. I hope this episode has gelled for you. We love making these podcasts for you, all our listeners. Your feedback means the world to us. So like, comment, or message us on Instagram, Facebook, or Messenger, or email us at happyrunning@flyingrunner.com. If you've got tips around gels or you want to share your experience with gels, please message us, and we'd love to hear your feedback. If you want to watch this episode, you're more than welcome to on Spotify and YouTube, or you can listen to us on Apple, Amazon, and all major podcast platforms. Remember, every step forward is a victory. Lace up, hit the road, and we'll see you next time on the Flying Runr podcast. Until then, happy running.
Happy running.